A single piece of ancient bronze can rewrite the story of humanity. Recent discoveries of artifacts forged in unbelievable heat are shattering the timeline of the Bronze Age. By the end of this, you will understand how these high-heat metallurgical finds are forcing us to redraw the map of ancient innovation. How did metalworkers achieve temperatures thought impossible for their time? And what forgotten networks of trade carried these secrets across continents? What does it mean for our past when the tools we use to date history are themselves being reshaped by fire? How much of what we accept as fact is simply waiting for the right discovery to melt it down? That stable timeline rests on a comforting logic. For over a century, archaeologists have carefully assembled the story of the Bronze Age like a grand mosaic, each tile a piece of evidence. We see it beginning in the great river valleys in Mesopotamia and along the Indus, around 3,300 years before the Common Era. The key innovation was simple yet revolutionary, combining copper with a small amount of tin to create bronze, a metal far harder and more durable than anything that came before. This new material gave its name to an entire era, a period thought to stretch for more than 2,000 years, until widespread upheavals around 1,200 years before the Common Era ushered in the Age of Iron. This chronology is not just about metal, it is built from everything left behind: the layered ruins of cities, the evolution of pottery designs, the spread of distinctive burial customs, and the remnants of trade routes. These clues create a framework that suggests a gradual, almost inevitable, spread of technology from a few advanced centers out to the wider world. It is a narrative of human progress moving in a clear, linear direction, from stone to copper to bronze to iron, with each society eventually reaching the same milestones. This idea that technological capability defines a society's place in history is a powerful organizing principle. It allows us to map the past with a sense of order, to place cultures on a timeline based on the tools they used. But what happens when the tools themselves tell a different story? When an artifact forged in the heart of a furnace contradicts the very layer of earth in which it was found? The entire mosaic, so carefully arranged, begins to tremble. The first crack in that stable timeline appeared not in a grand royal tomb, but in the quiet soil of a settlement mound in central Anatolia, in what is now Turkey. At a site known as Tepehisic, archaeologists unearthed a collection of metal artifacts that seemed, at first glance, entirely ordinary for a Bronze Age community. There were pins, small tools, and fragments of decorative items, but when these objects were subjected to rigorous scientific analysis, their true nature was revealed, and with it, a profound chronological problem. These were not simple copper items. They were made of tin bronze, a deliberate alloy created by combining copper with a small, precise percentage of tin. The dating of the layer they came from was unequivocal, placing them centuries earlier than the accepted model said such sophisticated bronze should have existed in that region. The science behind this revelation is as fascinating as the discovery itself. Researchers used a technique called lead isotope analysis. Think of it as a chemical fingerprint for metal. As copper and tin ores formed deep within the earth, they trapped tiny, unique signatures of lead isotopes based on the geology of their specific location. When an ancient artifact is tested, this fingerprint can be compared to known ore sources across the ancient world. The results from Tepehisic were clear and startling. The metal had been intentionally alloyed, and its composition pointed to a knowledge of metallurgy that the textbook timeline simply did not account for in that area at that early date. This was not a lucky accident or an impure ore. This was the product of an understood and applied technological process. So what does this single, quiet discovery actually mean? If a community in central Anatolia was producing quality tin bronze centuries before they were supposed to, it forces us to ask two difficult, parallel questions. The first possibility is one of independent innovation. Did these metalworkers, through their own experimentation and local ingenuity, stumble upon the perfect recipe without any outside influence? The second, and perhaps more disruptive possibility, involves connection. Does this artifact serve as a tiny, durable proof of a trade network or exchange of ideas that our historical maps have completely missed? A network that was carrying not just finished goods, but the technical knowledge of how to create them, across distances and between cultures we thought were isolated. This small pin or broken tool from Tepehisic is more than an object, it is a key, and it has begun to stretch the traditional map of the Bronze Age, pulling its boundaries wider and its origins further back in time than we ever expected. The quiet anomaly in Anatolia was only the beginning. Far to the northwest, in the rugged highlands of the Balkans, another discovery was waiting, one that would challenge not just the timeline, but the very limits of ancient metallurgical skill. Picture an archaeologist's careful hands brushing away centuries of compacted soil to reveal not a gleaming bronze sword, but something darker, heavier, with a peculiar, almost greasy luster. This was not a standard find. Laboratory analysis revealed its secret, a composition that sent a different kind of shock through the archaeological community. This blade, and others like it from early Bronze Age contexts in the region, contained surprisingly high levels of nickel. To understand why this is so revolutionary, we need to grasp a simple metallurgical truth. Nickel is a stubborn element. Creating a deliberate copper-nickel alloy, or even working with a nickel-rich ore, requires achieving and maintaining significantly higher furnace temperatures than those needed for standard copper or tin bronze smelting. For a long time, scholars believed such sustained, high-heat technology simply did not exist in that part of the world during that early period. The presence of these alloys was like finding a stainless steel spoon in a medieval kitchen. It simply did not belong. It was an anachronism, a piece of technology appearing in the wrong chapter of the story. The implications run deep. First, there is the matter of the raw material itself. Nickel-rich ores are not common. Their presence in these artifacts suggests that ancient prospectors possessed a sophisticated, almost intuitive geological knowledge. They weren't just picking up any shiny rock from a riverbed, they were seeking out specific, rare deposits, recognizing their unique properties. This hints at generations of accumulated, hands-on understanding of the land and its hidden resources. Second, and more critically, is the mastery of fire. To harness nickel, these metalworkers had to push their furnaces beyond conventional limits. They were engineers of heat, likely experimenting with furnace design, airflow, and fuel types to create a miniature inferno capable of taming this difficult metal. This was not a simple step forward, it was a specialized technological leap. So what does this Balkan blade represent? It stands as durable proof of a localized, advanced technical tradition operating on the fringes of the classic Bronze Age narrative. It suggests a world where innovation was not a single flame passed slowly from one grand civilization to the next, but a constellation of smaller, brilliant fires burning independently across the landscape. Perhaps these communities were more connected than we knew, sharing secrets along forgotten mountain paths, or perhaps driven by local needs and local genius, they simply figured it out. Either scenario paints a picture of prehistoric Europe that is far more dynamic, experimentally bold, and technologically diverse than our traditional maps allow. The high nickel alloys force us to listen to a whisper from the past, one that tells us the ancient world was capable of far more, far earlier, in far more places than we ever dared to imagine. These brilliant fires burning across the ancient landscape were not born from simple campfires. They were the product of deliberate, sophisticated engineering, a mastery of heat and chemistry that transformed rock into revolutionary material. To understand the true significance of these high-heat artifacts, we must step inside the workshop and examine the very heart of the operation, the furnace itself. Reaching temperatures high enough to smelt nickel-rich ores or create complex alloys, often exceeding 1,100 degrees Celsius, was not a matter of piling on more wood. It required a controlled, concentrated inferno, a tool as carefully designed as the artifacts it produced. Archaeological evidence points to several ingenious solutions. One key design was the forced draft furnace. Picture a simple clay structure, often built partially into a hillside for insulation, with one or more clay pipes, known as tires, leading into its base. The true innovation was not the furnace body, but the human breath behind it. By using bellows likely made from animal skins, an assistant could pump a steady, focused stream of air directly into the heart of the fire. This was not just fanning flames, it was supercharging them. The increased oxygen supply allowed the charcoal fuel to burn hotter and more completely, pushing temperatures to levels unattainable in an open fire. The choice of fuel was equally critical. Dry, dense charcoal made from hardwood burns far hotter and cleaner than ordinary wood, providing the consistent, intense heat needed for sustained smelting. The design of the crucible, the ceramic pot holding the ore and charcoal mix, also evolved. Thicker walls and specific clay recipes helped contain the extreme heat and withstand the chemical reactions within. But how do we know these reconstructions actually work? The proof comes from a fascinating field known as experimental archaeology. Teams of researchers, using only materials and techniques available in the Bronze Age, have built and operated replica furnaces based on archaeological finds. One such project, led by dedicated archaeometallurgists, meticulously gathered local clay, constructed bellows from goatskin, and produced charcoal from oak. After hours of careful preparation and laborious bellow work, their furnace roared to life. Instruments confirmed what the glowing, molten metal soon proved. They had consistently surpassed 1,100 degrees Celsius. As one leading archaeometallurgist notes, the breakthrough was not a mystery of magic, but a triumph of applied physics. The key was managing air flow and fuel. You are essentially building a small, efficient engine, where the bellows are the pump and the charcoal is the fuel. Controlling that system, knowing when to pump harder and when to let the fire breathe, was a skilled trade passed down through generations. This hands-on proof is transformative. It moves these artifacts from being mysterious anomalies to being the expected products of a well-understood craft. The ancient metalworker was a thermal engineer, a chemist, and a practical physicist all in one. Their workshop was a laboratory where air, earth, and fire were manipulated in a precise dance, a dance that could, on a good day, rewrite the very timeline of human achievement. Yet the furnace's heat tells only part of the story, for the most startling evidence of all lies not in the roar of the fire, but in the profound silence of the microscope. In laboratories around the world, researchers have trained powerful scanning electron microscopes on the surfaces of ancient bronze, searching for clues at a scale invisible to the human eye. What they have found, nestled within the metal matrix of certain artifacts, are tiny, almost ghostly inclusions of some of the rarest elements on Earth. We are talking about traces of the platinum group, metals like iridium and osmium. To understand why this is so baffling, consider their nature. These elements are incredibly resilient, with melting points soaring above 2,000 degrees Celsius, far beyond even the impressive capabilities of a Bronze Age forced draft furnace. They were not deliberately alloyed with copper. That technology belongs firmly to the 20th century. Their presence is accidental, a silent signature of the original ore. This changes everything. It means the ancient miner who dug that ore from the ground was not just collecting generic copper-bearing rock. They were, whether they knew it or not, exploiting a very specific and extraordinarily rare geological deposit. One leading theory suggests these platinum group traces could be a fingerprint of meteoritic iron. If true, it means some metalworkers were using ore that fell from the sky, material with a cosmic origin that naturally contains these exotic elements. Another possibility is that they had located terrestrial ore bodies with a unique, enriched chemistry, deposits that even today are considered uncommon. Either scenario paints a radically different picture of early resource exploitation. It suggests a depth of geological knowledge that goes far beyond simple surface scavenging. These communities, or the specialized prospectors among them, must have developed an intimate, generational understanding of their landscape. They learned to recognize not just any green-stained stone that indicated copper, but the specific, subtle signs that pointed to an ore of exceptional, perhaps even magical quality. This was not random mining, it was selective, strategic, and informed by a hard-won empirical science. The narrative of early metal use often simplifies it to a story of gradual improvement from poor ores to better ones. But these microscopic inclusions tell a more sophisticated tale. They hint at a pursuit of quality from the very beginning, a deliberate quest for the best possible raw materials, driven by artisans who understood that the secret to a superior blade or a more brilliant ornament began not at the forge, but in the choice of stone pulled from the earth. In these vanishingly small traces of iridium, we see the shadow of a forgotten prospector, a person whose keen eye and deep familiarity with the land provided the metalworker with a canvas of extraordinary potential. Their story, written in atoms, is one of the most compelling arguments that the Bronze Age world was far more complex, curious, and connected than our textbooks ever described. But the true measure of an ancient industry is not found in its treasures but in its trash, scattered across old excavation sites, often overlooked in favor of gleaming artifacts, are mountains of a strange, glassy, stony material. This is slag, the discarded waste product of smelting, and it holds within its vitrified form a complete and unedited record of the metalworker's craft. At places like Kestel in southern Turkey, researchers encounter not just a few pieces but vast, layered accumulations of this material, the industrial footprint of a forgotten operation. To the untrained eye, it is merely rubble. To an archaeometallurgist, it is a data-rich archive waiting to be read. The process is a form of reverse engineering. By analyzing the chemical composition and, more importantly, the microscopic crystal structure of slag, scientists can perform a kind of thermal autopsy. They can deduce the precise temperatures the furnace reached, the viscosity of the molten waste, and how efficiently the valuable metal was separated from the worthless rock. The slag tells a story the finished artifact cannot. It reveals the successes and failures of every single smelt. A case study from the Balkans provides a stunning example. Analysis of slag heaps at an early Bronze Age site showed a consistent, refined chemical signature across a massive volume of material. This was not the sporadic, variable waste of occasional experimentation. This was the signature of a standardized, repeatable process, operated at a high, sustained temperature, batch after batch after batch. The sheer scale of the slag piles indicated an output that went far beyond local needs. This points decisively toward organized, industrial-scale production, a coordinated effort involving miners, charcoal burners, furnace tenders, and traders. It transforms our view of the site from a simple village workshop into what we might call a prehistoric factory. That pile of blackened, glassy stone is therefore one of history's most honest documents. It cannot lie about the heat of the furnace, or the skill of the smelter, or the ambition of the enterprise. It is the direct physical evidence of ancient thermodynamic achievement, a testament written not in words but in the frozen flow of once molten rock. In this discarded refuse, we find the undeniable proof of an operation that was systematic, scaled, and sophisticated, forcing us to completely reconsider the economic and social complexity of societies we once thought were merely learning the basics of metal. Buried in the soft sands of a pre-dynastic Egyptian tomb, a small collection of beads tells a story that seems to defy time itself. At the site of Jersey, a resting place dating to around 3,200 years before the Common Era, archaeologists recovered a string of 9 simple, tubular beads. They were found alongside far more expected treasures, gleaming gold and deep blue lapis lazuli. Yet these 9 beads, dark and unassuming, were the true secret of the burial. They were made of iron. This discovery, in a tomb from a period firmly in the late Stone Age and early Copper Age, presents a chronological impossibility. The systematic smelting of iron from terrestrial ores, the hallmark of the Iron Age, would not begin in Egypt for another 2,000 years. So what were these objects doing here, and more importantly, what were they made of? The answer came not from archaeology but from astronomy. Advanced compositional analysis revealed a startling truth. These beads contained high levels of nickel, and their crystalline structure matched not any earth-bound ore, but the unique signature of iron-nickel meteorites. This was metal forged not in a terrestrial furnace, but in the heart of a dying star, delivered to the desert sands from the void of space. This transforms the artifact from an anachronism into something far more profound, a celestial gift. For the people who crafted them, this iron was quite literally a piece of the sky, a material of immense symbolic power and rarity. The technological insight required to work it, however, is where the story deepens. Meteoritic iron is not like copper. It does not occur in a pure, malleable state on Earth's surface. The craftsmen who made these beads faced a unique challenge. They had to recognize this strange, heavy stone for what it was, a metal-bearing material. Then, through a process of careful, repetitive heating and hammering, they had to work the tough nickel-iron matrix, slowly forging it into a thin sheet that could be rolled into a bead. This was not smelting, but it was a sophisticated, deliberate metalworking technique applied to the most exotic material imaginable. It represents a different branch of the technological tree, one driven not by common utility, but by the immense value of the extraordinary. The Jersey beads beautifully illustrate a powerful driver of early innovation, the allure of the rare and the sacred. The desire to possess and shape a piece of the sky would have provided a tremendous incentive to develop and refine new skills. This was metallurgy in the service of ritual, power, and cosmic connection. It blurs our neat categories, showing that the journey into the age of metal was not a single, straight path from copper to bronze to iron. It was a web of experiments where the deepest understanding of materials could be sparked by the arrival of a stone from the heavens. In these 9 small beads, we see the moment the sky touched human ambition, and the timeline of technology gained a new, stellar dimension. These scattered embers of innovation could not have burned in total isolation. A bead from Egypt, a blade from the Balkans, a pin from Anatolia, each speaks of a local genius, but together they hint at a larger conversation. To understand how such specialized knowledge could appear across such vast distances, we must look beyond the workshop and trace the invisible paths that connected the ancient world. The movement of goods, and more importantly, the movement of minds, may be the missing piece of this puzzle. The raw materials themselves tell a story of astonishing journeys. Tin, that crucial ingredient for classic bronze, is a notoriously rare metal. Major sources in the ancient world were few and far between. One of the most important lay in the remote highlands of what is now Afghanistan. From there, this precious commodity began an epic voyage. Caravans would have carried it west through the rugged passes of Iran into Mesopotamia and from there across the Levant. Other routes may have brought it by sea, across the Persian Gulf and up the great rivers. Meanwhile, copper sources in Cyprus, Anatolia, and the Alps fed into this growing network. These were not simple local exchanges. This was a complex intercontinental supply chain operating millennia before the term was invented. Wherever these materials traveled, so too did the knowledge of what to do with them. This brings us to a central debate in archaeology, the clash between two powerful ideas. On one side is the concept of independent invention. This theory suggests that disparate human societies, when faced with similar needs and resources, will often arrive at similar solutions entirely on their own. The high-heat furnaces of the Balkans and the sophisticated alloys of Anatolia could, under this view, be brilliant examples of parallel evolution in technology. On the other side stands the theory of technological diffusion. This idea posits that major innovations often originate in one place and then spread, carried by trade, migration, or conflict to other cultures. The evidence we have seems to whisper of diffusion. The sudden appearance of advanced tin bronze in a region, matched to ore sources hundreds of miles away, strongly suggests that the material and the recipe arrived together. The presence of rare nickel alloys in specific areas could indicate not just local skill, but the migration of that specific skill set from one mining district to another. So who were the carriers of these secrets? We are left with two compelling archetypes. The first is the itinerant craftsman, a master smith who packed his tools and his hard-won knowledge to travel with a merchant caravan or seek patronage in a foreign court. His skills were his currency, and he would trade them for wealth, status, or simply new experiences. The second is the secretive guild, a closed community of smiths within a society who guarded their techniques as sacred, hereditary knowledge, passed from father to son within a single tribe or city. This guild would have treated its high-heat methods as a state secret, a source of power and prestige that must never be shared with outsiders. The truth likely lies in a messy, human blend of both. Some techniques may have been closely held, while others flowed freely along the same routes as the tin ingots and copper oxide ingots found in shipwrecks across the Mediterranean. This transforms our view of the Bronze Age from a collection of isolated cultures progressing at different speeds into something far more dynamic, a nascent global network. Those small, advanced sites were not lonely outposts of genius. They were likely nodes in a vast and whispering web. A trader from the Aegean might have seen a strange furnace design in the Balkans and carried a description of it home. A community in Anatolia might have received a shipment of Afghan tin with instructions, passed along from miner to merchant to smith, on exactly how to mix it. When we connect these dots, the isolated artifacts cease to be anomalies. They become durable proof of an ancient conversation, one conducted not in words but in the shared language of fire and metal. Far to the east, along the fertile plains of the Indus River, an entire civilization was conducting its own symphony of fire and metal. The cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro were marvels of urban planning, with their grid-like streets and sophisticated drainage, but it is within their workshops that we find evidence of a different kind of genius. Among the most captivating artifacts to emerge from these ancient streets is a small, unassuming statuette known today as the Dancing Girl. Cast from a copper-bronze alloy, she stands just over 10 centimeters tall, a figure captured in a moment of confident, casual grace. Her significance, however, lies not in her pose but in her perfection. She is not hammered from a sheet of metal or crudely shaped. She is a single, flawless piece of hollow cast bronze, created using one of the most demanding techniques in the metalworkers' repertoire, the lost wax method. This process reveals a technological sophistication that moves far beyond simple utility. It begins with an artist sculpting the delicate figure in beeswax, capturing every fine detail, from the bangles stacked on her arm to the subtle tilt of her head. This wax model is then encased in a fine clay mold and heated. The wax melts and drains away, leaving a perfect negative cavity within the hardened clay. Into this cavity, the molten bronze is poured. The true mastery here is one of control. The metal must be fluid enough to fill every microscopic crevice of the mold, requiring a carefully maintained high heat. But the artistry does not end at the pour. The cooling process is critical. If the metal cools too quickly, it can crack or create imperfections. If it cools unevenly, the fine details can be lost. The craftsman had to manage this thermal dance precisely, ensuring the bronze solidified into a perfect replica of the original wax sculpture. Once cooled, the outer clay mold is broken away, revealing the metal figure within, ready for the final polishing that would bring her to life. This entire procedure, from wax model to finished artifact, represents a complete command over the metallurgical chain. It is not just about achieving heat, but about harnessing it with finesse. The same systematic precision is seen in the civilization's famous standardized weights, made from chert stone and bronze. These cubes exhibit a remarkable consistency in size and mass, evidence of a society that valued and enforced uniformity in commerce. To produce such consistent metal weights required standardized molds, consistent alloy recipes, and repeatable casting conditions. This points not to occasional, inspired craftsmanship, but to a mature, industrialized production system. There were likely specialized workshops where certain artisans perfected wax models, others mixed alloys and tended furnaces, and still others handled the final finishing. This level of organization and technical maturity fits uneasily into the early chapters of the traditional Bronze Age story. When we place the dancing girl beside the rough early copper items from other regions, the contrast is stark. She speaks of a culture that had not only adopted metallurgy but had refined it into a high art form, a culture where technology served both profound aesthetic expression and rigorous economic function. Her existence whispers a challenging question. If the Indus Valley had achieved this level of systematized mastery by the middle of the 3rd millennium before the Common Era, how long had they been practicing and perfecting these skills? How far back does the root of this technological tree truly reach? But how can we be sure of the age of these furnaces and workshops? The artifacts themselves are silent on the matter of their own birth. To anchor these discoveries in time, to truly rewrite the timeline, we must turn to the science of dating, a field undergoing its own quiet revolution. Two methods in particular have become the bedrock of this chronological reassessment, each offering a unique way to listen to the past. The first is Dendrochronology, or tree ring dating. When an ancient metalworker stoked their furnace, they used charcoal as fuel. That charcoal, often overlooked, is a time capsule. Under a microscope, the cross-section of a piece of charcoal reveals the distinct pattern of annual growth rings, much like a fingerprint. By comparing this pattern to a master chronology, a continuous sequence built from overlapping tree ring records that can stretch back thousands of years, scientists can pinpoint the exact year and even the season when that tree was felled to make charcoal. This gives us a remarkably precise date for the last time that furnace was lit, a snapshot of a specific industrial moment. The second, more famous method is radiocarbon dating. This technique measures the steady decay of a radioactive isotope, carbon-14, in any once living material like wood, bone, or seeds found in the same archaeological layer as a metal object. For decades, radiocarbon dating required relatively large samples and came with a margin of error that could span centuries, a frustratingly broad window when trying to pinpoint a technological revolution. But a recent breakthrough has changed the game: accelerator mass spectrometry, or a MS. This advanced technology is astonishingly precise. It allows scientists to date a single seed, a fleck of charcoal, or a fragment of bone no bigger than a grain of rice. The implications are profound. We can now date the organic material that was trapped under a collapsed furnace wall, or the food remains left by the workers in a smelting camp with a precision of just a few decades. This precision has directly challenged the old timeline. A compelling example comes from a workshop site in the Near East, long thought to belong to the Middle Bronze Age based on pottery styles and traditional typologies. When researchers applied a MS dating to charcoal samples taken directly from the furnace floors, the results were unequivocal. The workshop was several centuries older than anyone had suspected. The pottery found nearby was not an indicator of the metalworks age. It was simply older pottery that had remained in use or been reused. The workshop itself, and by extension the advanced technology it housed, belonged to an earlier, more innovative period. This is the crucial, often overlooked mechanism of change. The tools we use to measure time are not static, they are evolving alongside our discoveries. A more precise radiocarbon date is not just a minor adjustment, it is a lever that can shift the entire foundation of a historical era. When the charcoal from a high-heat furnace is dated to an earlier century, it pulls the artifact it fueled back with it, stretching the timeline of human capability. The story of the Bronze Age is being rewritten not just by what we find in the ground, but by our ever-improving ability to ask the Earth with exquisite precision when it all happened. The story of metal, however, was not a single script written only in the Old World. While civilizations around the Mediterranean and Indus were perfecting tin bronze, a completely separate narrative of innovation was unfolding on the other side of the globe, in the rugged landscapes of the Andes Mountains. Here, ancient South American cultures embarked on their own metallurgical journey, one that would lead them to a different, and in some ways more demanding, technological pinnacle. Cultures like the Moche, who flourished along the arid coast of what is now Peru between the 1st and 8th centuries of the Common Era, became master metalworkers without any knowledge of tin or the bronze it creates. Their signature achievement was a material known as arsenical copper. This was not a simple, pure copper. It was a deliberate alloy created by smelting copper ores that naturally contained arsenic minerals. The result was a metal harder, sharper, and more resistant to wear than pure copper, a material perfectly suited for creating the magnificent ceremonial knives, intricate masks, and ornate ornaments for which the Moche are renowned. This development represents a powerful case of independent invention, a separate genesis of complex metallurgy that challenges any single, linear narrative of human progress. The Moche and their predecessors did not receive their knowledge from across the oceans. They discovered it through their own intimate dialogue with the unique geology of their homeland. Their path to mastery, however, was fraught with a hidden danger that makes their accomplishments all the more remarkable. The process of creating arsenical copper is perilous. When arsenic-bearing ores are heated in a furnace, they release toxic fumes. Inhaling these fumes can lead to severe nerve damage, chronic illness, and worse. The ancient Andean smith, therefore, was not just a technician of heat, but a risk manager working with a volatile and deadly element. They had to develop methods to control these fumes, perhaps through specific furnace designs, working in well-ventilated spaces, or using protective coverings, though the exact precautions are lost to time. This necessity underscores the incredible value they placed on the superior material they could produce. They judged the risk worth the reward, pushing their technology forward in the face of a tangible, invisible threat. Their success required a deep chemical understanding, even if it was expressed in practical rather than theoretical terms. They learned to identify the right ores, to manage the smelting process to incorporate just enough arsenic without ruining the batch, and to work the resulting metal, which behaves differently from pure copper, into stunningly complex forms. The famous Moche ceremonial knives, with their curved blades and detailed cast figures, are testaments to this complete command of a difficult craft. This Andean path forces us to expand our definition of a Bronze Age. If we define it narrowly as the age of tin bronze, then the Americas never had one. But if we define it more broadly as an age of advanced, alloy-based metallurgy, then the Andes clearly experienced their own brilliant parallel metallic age. It was an age of copper and arsenic, of gold and silver, achieved through indigenous genius. This separate genesis suggests that the drive to transform stone into superior metal, to harness high heat and complex chemistry, is not a cultural accident but a widespread human potential. It whispers that when similar needs meet similar challenges, the desire for better tools, more impressive regalia, sharper weapons, different human societies in complete isolation can arrive at profoundly sophisticated, yet beautifully distinct solutions. The arsenical copper of the Moch does not just add a new chapter to the story of metal. It compellingly argues that the entire book of human innovation needs to be seen as a volume of multiple, simultaneous editions, each written in the language of its own landscape. This transformation of earth into gleaming metal was more than a technical process. It was a profound act of magic. To an ancient community watching a smith coax liquid light from dull stone, the furnace was not merely a tool, it was a portal. The person who commanded this portal held a status far beyond that of a simple craftsman. They were a bridge between the mundane world and a realm of elemental power, often viewed as part artisan, part priest, and part shaman. Across cultures, this sacred role is enshrined in myth. In Greek tradition, Hephaestus, the lame god, forged the weapons of the Olympians in a subterranean workshop alive with fire and automatons. In the Vedic hymns of India, Vishwakarma, the divine architect, shaped the universe itself with his tools. These are not just stories about making things, they are metaphors for creation, for imposing order on chaos, a power that echoed the acts of the gods. The archaeological record quietly supports this spiritual dimension. Excavations of early metalworking sites frequently reveal that furnaces and workshops were not placed in random, convenient locations. They were often situated on the edges of settlements, near waterways, or in specially designated areas, set apart from daily domestic life. This separation was likely both practical, due to the risk of fire and fumes, and deeply symbolic, marking the space as one of controlled danger and transformation, a liminal zone where normal rules were suspended. As one anthropologist who studies ancient technology notes, the furnace structure itself can be read as a ritual space. Its design, often echoing cosmological symbols like the world axis or the womb of the earth, created a microcosm where the raw essence of the planet was ritually cooked and reborn into a new, potent form. The act of smelting was an alchemical performance where the smith, through precise gestures, chants, or offerings believed to placate the spirits of the rock and fire, guided this rebirth. This cultural context solves a lingering puzzle. Why would communities invest such tremendous effort and face such tangible dangers, from toxic fumes to grueling labor, for a technology that was, in its earliest stages, unpredictable and rare? The answer lies in the dual nature of the power it conferred. A superior bronze axe certainly held practical power. It could clear forest, shape wood, and defend the community. But the true, transformative power was social and spiritual. The objects produced were not mere tools. They were condensations of ritual authority, cosmic connection, and elite status. A leader who possessed such items, or who controlled the smith who made them, demonstrated a direct link to supernatural forces and the hidden secrets of the earth itself. The smith's knowledge was therefore not just a trade secret to be guarded for profit. It was a sacred trust, a fragment of divine knowledge that legitimized the entire social order. In the roar of the furnace and the glow of the molten flow, we see the flickering origins of a figure who shaped not only metal, but the very fabric of belief and power in the ancient world. The smith's sacred craft depended on a network that spanned continents. In the late 14th century, before the Common Era, a single ship carrying that network's wealth met its end in the clear blue waters off the southern coast of what is now Turkey. Discovered by a sponge diver in the 1980s, the wreck at Uluburun offers a time capsule of Bronze Age commerce, a physical inventory of the ancient world's most valuable cargo. The ship's wooden hull had long since vanished, but its heavy freight settled on the seabed in a breathtaking scatter of raw potential. Most striking were the hundreds of copper ingots, each cast in a distinctive flat, rectangular shape with 4 protruding corners, an ingenious design that made them easier to carry, stack, and stow. These are the famous oxhide ingots, the standardized currency of an international metal trade. Alongside this mountain of copper lay other treasures, carefully packed tin ingots, vibrant blocks of cobalt blue glass from Mesopotamia, jars of terebinth resin, elephant tusks, and even a gold scarab bearing the name of the Egyptian queen Nefertiti. This was not a random assortment of goods, it was a carefully planned shipment of high-value commodities, a floating warehouse bound for a palatial economy. For decades, the Uluburun wreck was celebrated as the ultimate proof of the mature, sophisticated Bronze Age trade system we already knew from texts and scattered artifacts. It fit perfectly within the traditional timeline, a snapshot of a world in full metallic flower. Yet modern science has allowed this wreck to tell a deeper story, one that traces not just the existence of trade, but its specific, astonishing geography. Lead isotope analysis of the copper ingots revealed a precise chemical fingerprint. The metal did not come from a nearby source or even a regional one. It matched the ore deposits of Cyprus, an island over 500 kilometers away across the open sea. The tin, that crucial alloying partner, likely originated from mines as far away as Afghanistan. This single vessel, therefore, connects dots on a map that stretches from the Mediterranean to Central Asia. It represents the final, efficient link in a chain that began with miners digging in dangerous pits, continued with merchants haggling in distant ports, and ended with royal scribes recording the arrival of raw material for the palace workshops. The organized scale is staggering, implying treaties, standard weights, established maritime routes, and a shared understanding of value across multiple languages and cultures. So what does this spectacular, textbook-perfect wreck have to do with our earlier, anomalous high-heat artifacts? Uluburun shows us the destination. It is a portrait of the mature, interconnected global system that emerged after centuries, or perhaps millennia, of experimentation. Those earlier finds, the nickel-rich Balkan blades and the precocious Anatolian bronze, are glimpses of the journey. They are the tentative, local breakthroughs that eventually, through trade and the movement of people, linked up to form the very network this ship sailed. The Uluburun cargo is the system working as intended, a testament to what happened when scattered sparks of innovation finally connected into a sustained and brilliant flame. Yet the very flames that powered this global network were also vulnerable to the changing sky. The story of metal is not just one of human ingenuity, but of humanity's constant dialogue with a shifting environment. What if some of the most dramatic leaps in metallurgy were not born from peaceful prosperity, but from periods of profound scarcity? A growing body of research suggests that climate change and resource stress may have been silent, powerful catalysts, forcing ancient societies to innovate or adapt in the face of dwindling supplies. Consider the scenario of a prolonged drought. In a stable climate, a community might rely on known, local sources of copper ore, ones easily accessible and familiar. But a decades-long shift toward aridity could dry up vital waterways used for transportation or make certain mining areas untenable. The reliable green-stained rocks might simply run out. This kind of environmental pressure creates a powerful incentive. It pushes people to look beyond the obvious, to experiment with what they had previously overlooked. One compelling theory points to the composition of artifact hoards from certain turbulent periods. Archaeologists note a noticeable increase in the recycling of metal. Broken tools, worn-out weapons, and even damaged ceremonial objects were gathered and melted down with a new urgency. The archaeological signature of this is found in the slag, the waste material. During times of presumed plenty, slag tends to be rich in copper, indicating a somewhat wasteful process where good metal was left behind. In times of suspected scarcity, the slag becomes leaner, its chemical composition showing that metalworkers were squeezing every last bit of valuable copper from the ore or meticulously recovering it from old objects. This is not the work of complacent craftsmen, it is the work of conservators under pressure. Furthermore, the drive to find new resources could have led prospectors to riskier, more remote locations, or to experiment with different types of ore they had previously ignored because they were more difficult to smelt. That previously troublesome nickel-rich ore from the Balkans, for example, might have suddenly become worth the immense effort if the standard copper sources failed. The high-heat technology needed to master it may have evolved from a desperate need to make use of the only materials left. This perspective adds a crucial layer of ecological drama to our narrative. It frames technological leaps not solely as brilliant strokes of isolated genius, but as adaptive, communal responses to very real and threatening material pressures. The master smith, in this light, becomes a problem solver for the entire community, their furnace a tool of resilience. When we examine a period of significant innovation in the archaeological record, we must now also look at the climate data from ice cores and lake sediments. Did a surge in advanced alloy production coincide with a period of drought recorded in ancient tree rings? The possibility transforms our understanding of progress itself. It suggests that the drive to create a sharper blade or a more dazzling ornament might sometimes have been rooted in something far more basic: the universal human need to secure a future when the familiar world begins to change. The line between accidental discovery and deliberate choice is often written in the very first metals ever used. Deep within museum collections lie some of humanity's oldest copper artifacts, simple axes and awls that seem technologically primitive. Yet their unassuming appearance hides a subtle chemical secret, one that fuels a quiet but profound debate among archaeologists. Many of these earliest objects were not made from pure copper, but from a specific family of ores known as followers. These ores are complex, naturally containing small but significant traces of other elements, most commonly arsenic, antimony, or sometimes silver. This simple fact of geology presents us with a fascinating puzzle. When an early metalworker picked up a piece of follower ore and smelted it, did they know they were creating a superior product? Or were they simply using the most readily available green stone, with the beneficial alloy being nothing more than a happy accident? The answer rewrites our view of early innovation, revealing it not as a single eureka moment, but as a slow, cumulative process of observation and adaptation. To understand this, we can look at a specific case from the Alpine region of Europe. Here, researchers traced the chemical signature of early copper artifacts back to a particular follower deposit over a span of several centuries. At first, the artifacts show a simple use of whatever ore was easiest to gather from the surface. But as time goes on, the pattern changes. The metal from later artifacts becomes more chemically consistent, pointing more and more exclusively to that single, rich follower source, even as other, purer copper ores remained available nearby. This is a crucial clue. It suggests that over generations the community's metalworkers, or perhaps their prospectors, developed a clear preference. They were not just grabbing any copper-bearing rock, they were making a deliberate journey to a specific place to collect a specific type of ore. Why would they do that unless they had learned, through repeated trial and error, that the metal from this particular deposit behaved better? An axe forged from arsenic-bearing follow copper is harder, holds a sharper edge longer and is less brittle than one made from pure copper. The difference would have been immediately apparent in daily use. A tool that lasted through seasons of cutting and chopping rather than bending or breaking was a treasure. This empirical knowledge gained through the direct experience of use and repair would have been priceless. It represents the slow crystallization of practical science. The metalworker may not have understood the chemistry of arsenic, but they absolutely understood the language of performance. They learned to associate a certain type of heavy, greenish stone with a specific, desirable outcome in the finished tool. This incremental accumulation of cause and effect is the true engine of early technological progress. It moves the story away from a myth of a lone genius inventing bronze in a single flash and toward a more human, communal narrative. It was the collective memory of a community, the shared recognition that grandfather's axe, the one made from the stone from the South Valley, was the one that never failed. This category of artifact, the humble follow copper tool, sits precisely at that beautiful, blurry boundary. It marks the moment when random chance began to be filtered through the lens of human attention, when serendipity was slowly transformed through careful observation and selective repetition into intention. The true test of any ancient technology is not found in a textbook, but in the heat of a reconstructed flame. To move beyond theory and truly understand what those early metalworkers achieved, a dedicated group of modern researchers have taken a radical, hands-on approach. They are experimental archaeologists, and their laboratory is an open field. Their tools are replicas of ancient designs, and their goal is to recreate the past one smelt at a time. In one notable project, a team set out to answer a fundamental question: could a simple, pit-style furnace, powered only by human breath and charcoal, actually produce usable copper? Their setup was deliberately primitive. They dug a shallow pit in the earth and lined it with local clay to form a basic furnace bowl. For bellows, they stitched together goatskins, attaching a clay nozzle or tire to focus the airflow. Their fuel was not modern propane, but charcoal they had made themselves from oak wood, and their ore was raw malachite, a brilliant green copper carbonate mineral that would have been recognizable to any ancient prospector. The process that followed was anything but a quiet scientific demonstration. It was a physically demanding, soot-covered, and intensely focused performance. One researcher knelt by the furnace, rhythmically working the goatskin bellows, each squeeze forcing a concentrated stream of air into the heart of the burning charcoal. Another tended the fire, adding fuel and carefully layering in chunks of the green malachite ore. For hours, the team maintained this relentless rhythm, the bellows wheezing, the charcoal crackling, the furnace radiating a blistering heat. Embedded thermocouples gave them a real-time readout, and the data was clear. Their simple setup was consistently reaching and exceeding 1,100 degrees Celsius, more than enough to reduce the malachite to molten copper. The moment of truth came as the fire died down. Using long green sticks to carefully rake through the ashes, they uncovered small, gleaming beads of metallic copper formed at the bottom of the pit. This was not a symbolic gesture. It was a successful smelt, producing metal through a process identical to what would have been done thousands of years ago. The value of this experiment goes far beyond the few grams of copper produced. It generates concrete, tangible data that pure archaeology cannot. The team meticulously documented everything: the exact ratio of charcoal to ore needed for a successful reduction, the critical importance of maintaining a steady, forceful airflow, and the sheer physical endurance required of the person operating the bellows. They learned that skill was not just in the building, but in the tending, reading the color of the flames and the sound of the furnace to know when to pump harder or add more ore. This hands-on science transforms our understanding from abstract to visceral. Suddenly, the static copper artifact in a museum case is no longer just an object. It is the end product of a dynamic, smoky, and grueling technological ballet. It represents the ache in a smith's shoulders from hours at the bellows, the sting of smoke in their eyes, the shared focus of a team working toward a transformative goal. These experiments breathe life back into the silent tools and furnace fragments we dig up. They prove decisively what was possible, allowing us to test theories about ancient airflow, fuel efficiency, and the very human skill that turned theory into metal. In the glow of that replica furnace, the gap between past and present closes, not through speculation but through shared, soot-stained experience. The furnace's roar and the smith's skill would be meaningless without a final, defining shape. That shape was given not by a hammer alone, but by a silent, unglamorous partner, the ceramic mold. In the ruins of ancient Mesopotamian cities, among the shattered pottery and crumbling bricks, archaeologists uncover these humble objects, often broken and discarded. They are not artifacts of display, but artifacts of process, and they hold a quiet story about the industrialization of magic. These are not simple, one-use impressions in sand or clay. They are sophisticated, multi-part molds, carefully engineered from a special, heat-resistant ceramic mixture. A single mold for casting a socketed spearhead, for example, might consist of 2 or 3 precisely fitted sections, with channels carved to funnel molten bronze into every cavity. Once used, they could be opened, the casting removed, and the interior cleaned and prepared to be used again and again and again. The creation of the mold itself was a feat of high-temperature technology. The clay had to be formulated to withstand the thermal shock of pouring liquid metal at over 1,000 degrees Celsius without cracking or deforming. It then had to be fired in a kiln to become a permanent, durable tool. This means the mold maker was a ceramic specialist as much as the metal caster was a metallurgist, 2 advanced crafts operating in tandem. The implications of this reusable tool are profound. A single, well-made mold could produce dozens, perhaps hundreds, of nearly identical objects. This shifts production from the realm of bespoke, one-off creations into the realm of planned, repetitive output. It is the difference between a scribe painstakingly copying a single scroll and a printing press running edition after edition. The mold enabled consistency, and consistency is the first step toward true standardization. Now imagine finding fragments of the same mold design for the same type of axe or dagger at workshops in different cities across Mesopotamia. This is exactly what the archaeological record shows. The presence of these standardized molds across a region tells us that technical knowledge was not just a personal secret, it was a shared blueprint. A metalworker in and a metalworker in Nippur were, in a sense, reading from the same instruction manual, producing interchangeable parts for an ancient world. This level of uniformity hints at something beyond casual sharing. It suggests the possibility of early forms of controlled design, perhaps enforced by powerful temples or palaces that commissioned the weapons and tools. Or, more intriguingly, it points to the influence of guild-like structures, where master smiths guarded not just the recipe for bronze, but the specific, perfected designs for the molds that shaped it. The right to cast a particular type of ceremonial axe, with its exact proportions and symbolic decorations, might have been a protected form of intellectual property, a trademark of a specific workshop's prestige and skill. In these broken pieces of fired clay, we see the moment when the sacred craft of the smith began to meet the organized demands of an expanding society, transforming inspired artistry into a system capable of arming an army or supplying a city. The broken molds of Mesopotamia offer a blueprint, but language itself carries a different kind of blueprint, one etched into the very words our ancestors chose to describe their world. To trace the journey of metal, we must sometimes step away from the furnace and listen to the whispers preserved in ancient tongues. Philology, the study of historical language becomes an unexpected form of detective work, where the etymology of a single word can illuminate a trade route that vanished millennia ago. Consider the English word copper. It does not sound mysterious, yet its origin points directly to a specific island in the Mediterranean. It derives from the late Latin cuprum, which is itself a shortened form of the phrase Cyprium, meaning metal of Cyprus. For centuries, the island of Cyprus was the single most important source of copper for the civilizations ringing the Mediterranean. Its name became synonymous with the material it provided, a linguistic fossil of an ancient economic reality. When a Roman scribe wrote cuprum, he was not just naming a metal, he was referencing a geographic origin, a testament to a supply chain so dominant it branded the product. This pattern repeats across languages and materials. The word bronze entered English through French and Italian, tracing back to the Persian Birinj, but its ultimate origin is believed to be the city of Brundisium, a major port in ancient Italy where the metal was traded. Even the word tin has a contested but fascinating history, with some linguists proposing a connection to ancient Germanic terms for a thin, malleable sheet, reflecting one of its primary uses. These are not mere coincidences of sound. They are durable records of contact, commerce, and cultural priority. When a new, transformative material enters a society, it often arrives with its foreign name attached, especially if it arrives as a trade good from a specific, renowned source. The local population adopts the foreign term because they have no prior word for this novel substance. The name sticks, carrying within it the memory of its point of origin long after the memory of the journey has faded. This linguistic evidence creates a complementary map to the one drawn by lead isotopes. While chemistry traces the ore, philology can trace the idea. The movement of a word from one language family to another, like a semantic seed carried on the wind of trade, suggests a path of technological diffusion. If the word for furnace or smith shows a common root across widely separated Indo-European languages, it hints at a shared technological heritage reaching back to a common ancestral culture before its descendants dispersed across continents. It implies that the concept of the master smith and the specialized vocabulary of his craft was important enough to be carried along with a migrating people, embedded in their daily speech like a tool in a traveler's pack. This is not a perfect science, as words can shift meaning or be borrowed for complex reasons, but when the linguistic map aligns with the archaeological and chemical maps, the case becomes compelling. We begin to see a world where a trader from the Aegean did not just show a Mycenaean king an ingot of Cypriot copper. He likely used a word for it that the king's scribes then adopted into their own inventory lists. The technology moved not as an abstract concept, but as a package of tangible goods, skilled people, and the specific words needed to describe them. In the quiet evolution of the word copper, we hear the echo of 1,000 ships' captains pointing toward Cyprus, and in that echo, we find another thread connecting the scattered fires of the ancient world. The mastery of fire reached its most delicate expression not in a warrior's blade, but in a royal diadem. While furnaces roared to produce bronze and copper, another, more intimate flame was being coaxed to perform a miracle of miniature precision. In the workshops of the ancient Levant and Egypt, goldsmiths pursued a form of alchemy that demanded not brute heat, but exquisite thermal control, a technique known as granulation. This was the art of decorating a surface with a dusting of minute, perfect gold spheres, each one fused seamlessly to the base without a trace of visible solder. To achieve this, the artisan first had to create the granules themselves, a process requiring its own subtle touch. Tiny snippets of gold wire were placed on a bed of charcoal dust and heated just to the point where surface tension pulled the molten metal into a perfect microscopic bead. The true challenge, however, came in the attachment. The prepared object, its surface patterned with these tiny spheres, was then subjected to a carefully managed reducing atmosphere. This meant introducing a controlled amount of organic material, like charcoal paste or plant sap, into the heating environment. As this material burned, it consumed the oxygen around the gold, preventing oxidation. At this precise oxygen-free moment, under a heat just below gold's melting point, an extraordinary thing happened. The atoms at the point of contact between the granule and the base metal would migrate, bonding the two pieces together in a perfect, invisible weld. The margin for error was vanishingly small. A fraction too much heat, and the delicate granules would melt into blobs, or the entire piece would collapse. Too little heat, or the presence of oxygen, and the granules would simply not adhere. This was metallurgy as high art, a demonstration of finesse that rivals the control needed to alloy nickel with copper. A stunning example is a gold pectoral from the royal tombs of Byblos, where thousands of these minute granules form intricate geometric patterns and rosettes, creating a shimmering, textured surface that catches the light like captured stardust. This pursuit reveals a crucial driver of innovation: elite demand. The patrons for such work were not seeking stronger plows or sharper chisels. They were commissioning displays of ultimate status and divine affiliation. The goldsmith, therefore, was not just a craftsman but a visual philosopher, translating immense wealth and power into a language of light and perfection. Their furnace was a jeweler's bench, their bellows a gentle breath, and their product a testament to the fact that the ancient world's command of heat served not only the practical needs of survival, but the profound human desire to create objects of breathtaking, enduring beauty. The most honest stories from an ancient workshop are often its broken ones, scattered amidst the polished blades and perfect ornaments in museum storage, are artifacts of a different kind, the failures. These are the miscast objects, the cracked crucibles, the lumps of slag still gleaming with trapped metal. To the untrained eye, they are merely rubbish, the discarded evidence of a job gone wrong. To an archaeologist, however, these flawed pieces are priceless diaries, recording not success, but the struggle to achieve it. They document the precise moment where contemporary knowledge met its limit, offering a raw, unfiltered look at the learning process itself. Consider a bronze axe head recovered from a European site, its surface pocked with a strange, spongy texture. This is not corrosion, but a casting flaw known as gassing. It occurs when moisture is trapped in the clay mold, or when the molten metal absorbs gases from the fuel as it is poured. When the metal cools and solidifies, these gases escape, leaving behind a network of tiny bubbles that weaken the structure. This single flawed object tells a complex tale. It reveals that the metalworkers had mastered the alloy and the heat, but were still refining their understanding of the ceramic side of the craft. The mold may have been used before it was completely dry, or the pouring technique may have introduced turbulence. This axe was never used. It likely shattered under its first real test, a costly lesson solidified in metal. Similarly, a crucible fragment found at a Near Eastern site shows a clean, sharp crack running through its wall. This is the signature of thermal shock. The ceramic vessel, designed to hold molten metal, was heated too quickly or cooled too abruptly, causing the material to fracture under the stress. This failure speaks to the unforgiving physics of the process. It tells us that controlling the temperature of the metal was only half the battle. Managing the thermal journey of the very container was equally critical. Perhaps the furnace draft was too strong that day, or a crucible was taken from the heat and set on a cold stone floor. Each mistake encoded a new parameter to be understood and controlled. Even the slag piles hold evidence of imperfection. While efficient slag is lean, with most metal extracted, archaeologists frequently find chunks that are still rich in copper or tin. This is waste that tells of a smelt that failed to fully separate the precious metal from the rocky matrix. The temperature may have been too low, the chemical conditions inside the furnace not quite right, or the ore may have been of a poorer quality than expected. This material represents lost wealth and lost labor, a tangible measure of the economic risk inherent in every firing of the furnace. These artifacts collectively dismantle the myth of seamless, inevitable progress. They show us that innovation was not a straight line, but a winding path of trial and error, littered with setbacks and ruined batches. The master smith was not born with complete knowledge. He was forged through experience, his expertise built upon a foundation of remembered failures. Each cracked mold taught a lesson about ceramic composition. Each bubbled casting refined the understanding of the pouring ritual. Each metal-rich slag pile underscored the need for precise furnace management. When we hold a perfectly balanced Bronze Age sword, we are not looking at a first attempt. We are looking at the end product of generations of accumulated problem-solving, the final, elegant answer to 1,000 previous questions that were answered only with the harsh, metallic truth of failure. These broken things, then, are not evidence of incompetence but of courage. They mark the edges of the known world and show us the perseverance required to push beyond them. A broken sword blade from a Mycenaean warrior's tomb holds no inscription of its origin. Yet today, that silent metal can speak, revealing a journey across the sea written in atoms. This is the power of geochemical sourcing, a quiet revolution in archaeology that allows us to trace an object back to the very mountain from which its ore was torn. Techniques like lead isotope analysis and trace element fingerprinting work like a forensic science for the ancient world. Scientists take a microscopic sample, often no larger than a pinprick, from an artifact. Within that tiny sliver of metal, locked in its crystalline structure, is a unique chemical signature, a fingerprint imparted by the geology of the original ore deposit. No two ore bodies are exactly alike in their subtle mix of elements and isotopic ratios. By comparing the fingerprint of the artifact to a growing database of known mines across the globe, researchers can perform a match, sometimes with astonishing precision. A classic example is the copper found in magnificent Mycenaean swords and ingots. For decades, scholars theorized about trade with Cyprus, the island famed for its copper. Geochemical sourcing provided the proof. The lead isotope signature of Mycenaean bronze consistently matched the ore deposits of the Cypriot Troodos Mountains. A weapon wielded by a Greek king was, in essence, born from a Cypriot hillside. This transforms every anonymous metal object into a kind of passport, stamped with an invisible, indelible record of its birthplace. Suddenly, a simple ingot in a shipwreck is not just a piece of metal, it is a data point on an ancient shipping manifest. A dagger in a Scandinavian bog becomes evidence of a pan-European exchange network. This ability to trace the journey of raw materials proves the existence of sophisticated, long-distance economic networks operating on a scale and at a time that often defies traditional historical models. It moves trade from the realm of suggestive possibility into the domain of demonstrable scientific fact. We can now see that the Bronze Age world was woven together by threads of commerce so fine and far-reaching that a miner's labor in Cyprus could directly empower a ruler in Greece, with the proof resting not in a faded ledger, but in the enduring chemistry of the metal itself. The journey from celestial iron to a hardened terrestrial blade marks one of humanity's greatest leaps. In the layered soils of Kaman Kailhöyük, a settlement mound in central Turkey, archaeologists uncovered a small, corroded iron object that seemed typical for its early second millennium before the Common Era context. It was not a weapon of war or a regal ornament, but a simple, utilitarian tool. Yet when researchers placed a sliver of this metal under a high-powered scanning electron microscope, they witnessed a revelation written in crystal. The microstructure of the iron told a story of intentional transformation. Along its edge, the metal revealed a distinct, carbon-rich layer, a zone that was significantly harder than the soft, pure iron at its core. This was not an accident of the smelting process, nor was it the natural result of using a particular ore. This was the clear, deliberate signature of carburization, an early form of steelmaking. Carburization is a sophisticated thermal process. It involves taking a finished object of wrought iron, which is relatively soft and malleable, and subjecting it to a long, controlled heating in the presence of a carbon-rich material such as charcoal. Over many hours in the red-hot coals, carbon atoms from the fuel slowly diffuse into the surface of the iron, penetrating its crystalline lattice. This chemical marriage fundamentally changes the metal's properties, creating a thin but incredibly resilient steel skin on the object. The artisan who made the tool from Kaman-Kalehuyuk had performed this precise operation. They had taken their iron blade or point, and through patient, knowledgeable application of heat and carbon, had engineered a superior material, one with a hard, wear-resistant edge perfectly suited for cutting or piercing, backed by a tougher, more flexible core. The implications of this small tool are tectonic. The conscious, understood production of carburized steel has long been hailed as a hallmark of the later Iron Age, a technology firmly associated with the first millennium before the Common Era. This artifact from Anatolia pushes that milestone back by over 1,000 years, squarely into the middle of what we call the Bronze Age. It represents the absolute pinnacle of pyrotechnology from that era, a direct conceptual and technical bridge to the age that would follow. This is not merely an earlier date on a timeline. It forces a complete re-evaluation of the period's technological trajectory. It suggests that the knowledge of how to transform iron into steel was not a sudden invention that sparked a new age, but rather a specialized technique that was discovered, practiced, and perhaps even lost and rediscovered long before it became widespread. The high-heat furnace had proven it could do more than alloy copper. It could fundamentally re-engineer the very nature of iron itself. In that microscopic carbon-rich zone, we see the quiet, deliberate birth of a material that would one day build empires, yet for centuries it may have remained a rare and guarded secret, a whisper of the future forged in the fires of the Bronze Age. That mastery of fire and steel did not remain confined to the workshop. The profound consequences of this technology flowed outward, reshaping the very foundations of human society in ways as permanent as a bronze cast. The ability to produce superior metal created a new kind of power, one that was not inherited from ancestors or granted by the gods, but forged in the secrecy of the furnace. Control over the metallurgical process became the ultimate lever. Think of the resources required, the rare tin from distant mountains, the skilled labor of the smith who understood the rituals of the fire, the charcoal burners who supplied the fuel. Organizing this chain of production demanded capital, coordination, and authority. It is no coincidence that the earliest large-scale metal production sites are often found in close association with emerging centers of political power, with palaces and temple complexes. Those who controlled the supply of metal controlled the means to create both wealth and fear. A leader who could commission 100 identical bronze spearheads was not just arming his guards, he was demonstrating a command over an entire economic and technological system that lesser chieftains could not match. This control accelerated social stratification, creating a stark divide between those who possessed metal objects and those who did not, and more critically, between those who controlled the means of their production and everyone else. The smith, once perhaps a revered spiritual figure, increasingly became a client of the palace, his sacred knowledge now in the service of state power. The metal itself made this new hierarchy tangible and durable. A bronze ceremonial axe was not merely a tool, it was a physical token of authority, an object too valuable and complex for common use, designed to be displayed and recognized. It transformed abstract status into a gleaming, unbreakable reality. In this way, the chemistry of the alloy and the heat of the forge did not just reshape metal, They helped crystallize the very concept of kingship and elite privilege, forging the social structures that would define civilizations for millennia to come. This concentration of power found its most direct expression on the battlefield. The evolution of weaponry driven by metallurgical advances fundamentally changed the nature of conflict and, in turn, the people who waged it. Compare the early copper dagger, a relatively soft stabbing weapon, to the later bronze sword. The sword is a different instrument entirely, a slashing weapon that requires space, training, and a specific stance to wield effectively. Its creation demanded a longer, more stable casting, a superior alloy to prevent bending, and careful hammering to create a resilient edge. This was not a tool adapted for hunting or daily chores. It was an object engineered for a single purpose: conflict between people. Its existence suggests the emergence of a specialized role, the warrior whose sole occupation was mastering this new technology of violence. Similarly, the development of tougher alloys allowed for more effective armor, from bronze plates to scaled helmets. This protective technology created a battlefield advantage that was not easily overcome. A fighter equipped with a bronze helmet, a shield bossed with bronze, and a hardened spear tip was exponentially more likely to survive an engagement than one with leather and stone. This technological disparity made warfare more decisive and more costly, favoring those societies that could produce and equip such fighters in numbers. The result was the rise of a professional warrior elite, a class whose identity and status were built around their mastery of these advanced metal weapons. Their loyalty was often secured through the gift of finely crafted blades and ornate armor, direct products of the rulers' controlled metallurgy. Warfare evolved from sporadic raiding into a more organized, strategic endeavor, capable of projecting power over greater distances and conquering territories to secure the very metal resources that made it possible. The bronze sword, therefore, was more than a weapon. It was both a cause and a symbol of a new social order, one where military might, backed by industrial production, became the primary engine of political expansion. In the gleam of a polished blade, we see the reflection of the first armies and the hard truth that the forge did not just create tools for society, it helped forge the tools of empire. Rewriting history is a quiet, collective rebellion. For every archaeologist who uncovers an artifact that challenges the timeline, there are dozens of colleagues who have spent their entire careers building the very model now under threat. This is the human drama behind the scientific headlines, a story not of malice, but of deeply held conviction meeting inconvenient evidence. When a researcher first presents data on a high-heat artifact that seems centuries out of place, the initial reaction within the academic community is rarely celebration. It is often a profound, professional skepticism. This skepticism is not a flaw in the system. It is the system's essential immune response. Generations of careful scholarship have constructed an intricate framework for understanding the past, a framework that provides context and meaning for every new find. To suggest that a fundamental pillar of this framework is wrong is to ask an entire field to reconsider its foundational story. The process that follows is rigorous and often slow, unfolding in the formal language of peer-reviewed journals and the charged atmosphere of academic conferences. Imagine a young researcher standing before a room of esteemed professors, presenting lead isotope data from a Balkan blade. The questions that follow are not hostile, but they are piercing. Could the dating of the site layer be contaminated? Might the artifact be an intrusion from a later period? Is the geochemical signature being interpreted correctly? Each query is a necessary stress test designed to poke and prod at the new claim until either its weaknesses are exposed or its strength is proven. This is the crucible where ideas are either tempered into accepted fact or broken apart. The shift never happens because of a single, spectacular discovery. It is the relentless accumulation of evidence from disparate corners of the map that finally tips the scales. A curious nickel alloy here, a precocious tin bronze there, a carburized iron tool from a third location. For years, each of these might be published as an interesting anomaly, a puzzle for future research. But as the catalogue of anomalies grows, a pattern emerges. They begin to form a chorus, and their collective voice becomes too loud to dismiss as mere static in the data. This is the essence of a paradigm shift. It is not a sudden explosion, but a slow, grinding tectonic movement in the landscape of knowledge. Senior scholars who once defended the old chronology find themselves wrestling with the new data, re-examining their own assumptions. The textbooks do not change overnight. First, a footnote is added acknowledging a controversial find. Then, a revised edition includes a new section titled Emerging Perspectives. Finally, a new generation of students is taught the revised timeline as established fact, often unaware of the decades of debate that made it possible. This meta-narrative reveals a beautiful truth about how we understand our past. The timeline of the Bronze Age is not being rewritten solely by silent artifacts pulled from the ground. It is being rewritten in lecture halls, in laboratories, and in the margins of academic papers through a very human process of doubt, debate, and ultimately, a shared courage to follow the evidence wherever it leads. The quiet rebellion in the lecture halls guarantees one thing: the story is far from over. For every artifact that forces a timeline to stretch, it reveals a dozen new mysteries waiting in the shadows of the past. The most compelling questions are no longer about what we have found, but about what remains hidden, and about the revolutionary tools we are only now developing to search for it. Take the tantalizing traces of platinum group metals in those early artifacts. We have found their microscopic signatures, but the larger story eludes us. Were there even earlier, more deliberate experiments with these celestial materials? Could there be caches of worked meteoritic iron or objects made from rare terrestrial alloys that we have simply not yet recognized for what they are, sitting unremarked in museum storage drawers? Then there is the great geographical puzzle of tin. We can trace it across continents through isotope analysis, but the map has glaring gaps. Where are the earliest, missing tin mines that supplied the initial surge of the Bronze Age? Geological surveys suggest potential sources in Central Asia, the Caucasus, and even Western Europe, but confirming which ones were active in the third millennium before the Common Era requires not just digging, but a new kind of looking. This is where the future of discovery is being written, not only with shovels, but with handheld scanners and machine learning algorithms. A transformative tool is now commonplace in the field, the Portable X-ray Fluorescence Analyzer, or PXRF. Imagine an archaeologist at a dig site in Anatolia, holding a device the size of a cordless drill over a corroded metal fragment. With a harmless beam, it provides an instant, non-destructive chemical readout. Is this piece bronze or pure copper? Does it contain nickel or arsenic? This real-time data allows for on-the-spot decisions, guiding the excavation toward areas of high technological interest and preserving fragile objects for more detailed study later. It turns every field season into a live laboratory. Back in the Research Institute, another revolution is brewing in the analysis of the most humble material, slag. The composition and microstructure of this industrial waste holds immense data, but manually interpreting it is slow and subjective. Now, researchers are training artificial intelligence systems to recognize patterns in thousands of slag samples. The AI can detect subtle variations in crystal formation or chemical bands that might indicate a change in furnace temperature, a shift in ore source, or a refinement in technique, patterns a human eye could easily miss over a career. These technologies promise to democratize and accelerate insight, turning vast, silent datasets into coherent narratives of innovation and trade. Each answered question, therefore, does not bring us to an end. It peels back a layer to reveal a deeper, more intricate mystery beneath. The promise of the next dig, the next lab analysis, is that we have only begun to listen to the full story the ancient world has been whispering in metal and stone all along. The evidence from the furnace floor and the microscope coalesces into a single, inescapable conclusion. The traditional timeline of the Bronze Age, that smooth arc from simple to complex, is not so much wrong as it is incomplete, a simplified sketch that misses the vibrant, chaotic detail of the original. If we were to visualize this revised history, it would not resemble a clean, upward curving line. It would look far more like a constellation or a spiky, luminous web. Across the vast canvas of Eurasia, brilliant points of light ignite not in sequence but often in startling simultaneity. One hotspot glows in central Anatolia, where sophisticated tin bronze appears centuries ahead of schedule. Another flares in the Balkan highlands, where metalworkers tamed nickel in furnaces of astonishing heat. A steady, intense light burns along the Indus River, where hollow cast statues and standardized weights speak of a mature, industrialized craft. Flickers appear in the Levant with celestial iron and in the Andes with perilous arsenical copper. These are not outliers to be explained away, they are the heart of the new narrative. They reveal a world where technological genius was not the sole property of a few river-valley civilizations, but a potential that could, and did, ignite in diverse landscapes whenever the right conditions aligned. This revised picture fundamentally changes how we understand progress itself. Innovation was not a linear march, a baton passed neatly from one leading society to the next. It was sporadic and diffuse, a story of fits and starts, of brilliant local discoveries that might flourish, be lost, or slowly seep into the wider world through trade and tale. The driver was never a single force. Sometimes it was the harsh lash of environmental pressure, a drought that forced a community to experiment with the only ores left. Other times it was the gentle pull of cultural exchange, a traveling smith sharing a furnace design or a merchant delivering a new recipe with his ingots. And always underpinning it all was raw human curiosity, the relentless desire to see what happens if you heat this stone a little longer or mix that metal with another. This does not mean we discard the old timeline. The grand sequence from copper to bronze to iron still holds a broad, organizing truth, but we must now see it not as a rigid staircase, but as a rugged mountain range. The traditional model maps the well-trodden passes and the highest peaks, the eras when certain technologies became dominant and widespread. The new evidence reveals the hidden valleys and isolated cliffs where small groups of people reached astonishing heights long before the main trails were built. Our history is infinitely richer for this complexity. It replaces a story of destined centers with a symphony of scattered, resilient voices, each contributing a unique verse to the epic of human ingenuity. The quiet pin from Tepehisic and the gleaming dancing girl from Mohenjo-Daro are no longer separated by a gulf of time and primacy. They are contemporaries in a global awakening, different notes in the same ancient metallic song. These glowing embers from the forge are not just clues, they are a profound lesson in the nature of human ingenuity. The high-heat artifacts we have traced across continents reveal a past that is wonderfully untidy, resistant to our desire for simple, linear stories. They teach us that progress is not a slow, steady march toward a predetermined future. It is a story written in scattered, brilliant flashes, like lightning strikes across a dark landscape, each one illuminating a pocket of genius that the grand narrative had left in shadow. A community in the Balkans masters nickel, while another in Anatolia perfects tin bronze, and a culture in the Andes braves toxic fumes for a harder metal, all while separated by vast distances and distinct traditions. This is not the slow spread of an idea from a single source. It is the simultaneous flowering of human potential in response to local needs, local resources, and local curiosity. Our neat historical categories, the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, are useful maps, but they are not the territory. The real past is a landscape where these ages overlap, bleed into one another, and sometimes exist in the same moment in different places. A society casting celestial iron beads exists in its own metallic age, even as its neighbors work in stone. These discoveries challenge us to hold two truths at once, to see both the broad patterns and the stunning exceptions that give the past its vibrant, unexpected life. As new tools allow us to listen more closely to these ancient materials, we must remain humble before the evidence. The true mark of understanding is not defending an old story, but having the courage to let the story change. Each artifact pulled from the earth is a message in a bottle from a distant shore of time, and its message might be that we have only begun to comprehend the ingenuity of those who came before. The fires that shaped civilization are still speaking if we are willing to hear them. If this journey into the rewritten Bronze Age has ignited your curiosity, share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe to delve deeper into the mysteries that lie just beneath the surface of history.